Two guys quit their corporate jobs on the same week. Both had $15,000 in savings. Both bought a used SUV, some black polos, and a stack of business cards that said security consultant. 18 months later, one of them is driving a brand new truck, running 6 contracts, and clearing more than he ever did at his old desk job. The other one is filing for bankruptcy, dodging calls from a lawyer, and wondering what went wrong. Same industry, same starting capital, same year. Completely different endings. And here's the part that should bother you. It wasn't hustle that separated them. It wasn't luck either. It came down to a handful of numbers almost nobody running a security company actually sits down and calculates before they start. That matters right now more than ever, because private security has quietly become a $50 billion a year industry in the US alone, growing faster than public policing budgets can keep up. Corporations are hiring it. Retailers are hiring it. Even residential neighborhoods are hiring it. On paper, it looks like one of the easiest cash businesses left in America. Low startup cost, constant demand, recurring contracts. But looks easy and is profitable are two very different claims. So before you consider this as a business, an investment, or even a career pivot, we need to follow the money, every dollar of it, and figure out exactly where one of these two guys made his fortune, and the other lost everything. Here's the pitch every new security company owner falls in love with. You sign a contract to provide a guard at a retail plaza, a construction site, or a corporate lobby. You bill the client $30 an hour. You pay your guard $16 an hour. Simple subtraction says you just pocketed $14 an hour per guard, doing basically nothing but answering the occasional phone call. Scale that across 10 guards working 40 hours a week, and the math gets intoxicating fast. $14 an hour times 10 guards times 40 hours times 52 weeks. That's over $290,000 a year in profit, just from bodies standing around with radios. No inventory, no manufacturing, no shipping delays, just humans and hours. This is the exact spreadsheet that convinces smart, capable people to quit stable jobs and pour their savings into a security company. And it's not wrong, exactly, it's just dangerously incomplete. Because that $14 an hour profit is calculated the way a hobbyist budgets a road trip: gas money in, gas money out, ignore everything else. Real businesses don't work off gross billing minus gross wages. There's a second ledger running underneath every single guard hour you sell. One built from payroll taxes, workers' comp premiums, liability insurance, licensing, uniforms, turnover, and overhead. None of that shows up in the pitch. All of it shows up in the bank account. This is where the two owners from our story quietly started diverging, long before either of them noticed. One of them treated that $14 an hour number as real money he could spend, save, and reinvest. The other understood it was a fiction, a placeholder number that had to survive a gauntlet of hidden costs before it became actual profit. So let's run that gauntlet. Let's take one single guard, one single billed hour, and follow every dollar as it disappears, because what's left at the end is going to surprise you. Let's take that $30 an hour billing rate and actually walk it through, dollar by dollar, the way a real operator has to. Start with the guard's pay, $16 an hour. Simple enough. But the moment you become an employer, the government wants its cut too. Payroll taxes, Social Security, Medicare, federal and state unemployment, typically add another 8 to 10% on top of wages. That's roughly $1.40 to $1.60 an hour, gone before you've done anything else. Now comes the number that blindsides almost every new owner: workers' compensation insurance. Security is classified as a higher risk industry, and depending on your state and whether your guards are armed, workers' comp can run anywhere from $3 to $8 per $100 of payroll, sometimes higher for armed positions. On a $16 wage, that can eat another $50 to $1.30 an hour, easily. Then there's general liability and professional liability insurance, the policies that protect the company if a guard makes a mistake, a client gets hurt, or someone claims negligent hiring. Spread across billed hours, that's commonly another $75 to $1.50 an hour, sometimes more for higher risk contracts. Add uniforms, equipment, radios, and background checks. Call it $0.30 an hour amortized over a guard's tenure. Then add licensing and mandatory training hours the state requires you to pay for, another $0.20 to $0.40. And here's the cost nobody budgets for at all: turnover. Security has notoriously high turnover. Some estimates put it near 100 to 150% annually. Every time a guard quits, you're paying for advertising, screening, onboarding, and training a replacement, often before that seat generates a single profitable hour. Amortized properly, that can quietly cost another $0.50 to $1 an hour across your workforce. Add it up. Start at $14 an hour in profit. Subtract payroll taxes, Workers' comp, liability insurance, equipment, training, and turnover costs. That $14 doesn't land at $10 or even $7. For a lot of real-world operators, it lands somewhere between $2 and $5 an hour. Sometimes less. That's not a rounding error. That's the entire business model getting reevaluated in real time. The owner, who's still mentally spending $14 an hour, is planning a lifestyle his actual margins can't support. The one who did this math up front, he's not panicking. He's asking a much smarter question. If commodity guard hours are this thin, where's the real money in this industry actually hiding? Contrast. The guard company versus the contract company, that question, where's the real money hiding, is exactly where our two owners' paths split for good. The first owner kept doing what felt safe, bidding on standard guard contracts, retail security, warehouse patrols, office lobbies. It's the most crowded corner of the industry because it's the easiest to enter. Anyone with a business license and some polos can compete for it, which means clients treat guards like a commodity and they shop on price. He kept winning contracts by shaving his rate down to $28, then $26 an hour just to beat competitors. Remember that 2 to 5 an hour margin from the last section? At $26 billed instead of $30, some of his contracts were now operating at a loss, and he didn't fully realize it until his accountant did the math on his behalf. 6 months too late. The second owner made one decision that changed everything. He stopped competing on price and started competing on specialization. Instead of bidding for generic guard posts, he pivoted into executive protection, event security for high-profile clients, and compliance-heavy niches. Cannabis dispensaries, crypto ATMs, and cash handling logistics, industries where insurance requirements and licensing scare off most competitors. Fewer companies can even qualify to bid, which means less price pressure and dramatically better rates. The math tells the story better than any pep talk could. Standard guard contracts might bill $28 to $32 an hour with that razor-thin 2 to 5 margin we just calculated. Specialized contracts, executive protection, high-risk cash transport, government-adjacent work can bill $50 to $85 an hour or more, with margins that are 3 to 5 times higher, because the barriers to entry filter out the race-to-the-bottom competitors entirely same industry. Same core service, a trained person keeping something safe. But one owner was fighting for scraps in the most contested part of the market, and the other found the exact same fork in the road we're describing right now, and simply took the other path. Here's the catch. Though, and it's the part most start a security business videos never mention, those higher margin niches don't just require better sales skills. They require you to carry far more risk on your shoulders than any standard guard post ever will. Because the moment you start protecting executives, handling cash, or supervising armed personnel, you've stepped directly into the part of this industry that actually kills companies. Not slow margins, but a single catastrophic liability event. The liability bomb. What actually kills these companies here is an uncomfortable truth most new security owners never let themselves think about. Thin margins don't bankrupt companies. Lawsuits do. Picture this scenario and understand it's not hypothetical. Versions of it play out in this industry every year. A guard at a shopping plaza restrains a suspected shoplifter, using force that a court later determines was excessive. Or an armed guard on a night patrol discharges a weapon during a confrontation that escalates faster than anyone was trained to handle. The client gets sued, the guard gets sued, and so does the company that hired, trained, and deployed that guard, often under a legal theory called negligent hiring or negligent supervision, meaning the company is accused of not vetting or preparing that employee properly. Now let's talk numbers, because this is where the real gap hides. A typical general liability policy for a small to mid-sized security company might carry a limit of $1 million per occurrence, maybe $2 million aggregate for the year. Sounds like plenty, until you see what these judgments actually look like. Wrongful death suits, serious injury claims, and negligent hiring settlements involving security companies have resulted in verdicts and settlements running anywhere from $500,000 to well over $5 million. Depending on jurisdiction and severity, do the math on that gap. If your policy caps out at $1 million and a jury awards $3 million, your company doesn't just lose the case, it loses everything. Assets get liquidated. The corporate structure that was supposed to protect the owner's personal finances gets challenged in court. Years of grinding out 2 to 5 an hour margins, painstakingly built up contract by contract, can be wiped out by a single incident that takes less than 60 seconds to occur. This is the part of the business plan that never makes it into the pitch deck because it's not a cost, it's a probability. Most months, nothing happens, and the owner who skimped on coverage looks like a genius for keeping overhead low. Then one incident happens, and the owner who paid for higher liability limits, invested in real training programs, and structured contracts carefully turns out to be the only one still standing. And here's the twist that catches even cautious owners off guard. The fastest way to walk straight into this liability bomb isn't neglect. It's growth. Because the moment you start scaling, adding contracts, adding guards, adding hours, you're not just multiplying your revenue, you're multiplying every single point of exposure we just talked about, often faster than your systems can keep up. Growth is supposed to be the reward. You survive the thin margins, you dodge the liability bomb, you start winning more contracts, and naturally, you assume that more is simply better. More guards, more sites, more revenue. That assumption is exactly what nearly took down a security company owner who within a single year tripled his contracts. On paper, it looked like a success story worth celebrating. He went from 5 contracts to 15 almost overnight, and revenue climbed right along with it. But revenue was the only thing that scaled smoothly. Everything underneath it started buckling. Scheduling 40 guards across 15 sites with a spreadsheet and a group text is a completely different problem than scheduling 12 guards across 5. Shifts started overlapping. Sites went uncovered when guards called out, which meant existing staff got pulled into overtime. And overtime doesn't just cost time and a half, it quietly wrecks the margin math we walked through earlier. Remember that 2 to 5 an hour profit on a standard contract? Push a guard into overtime without adjusting your billing, and that margin doesn't shrink. It goes negative, then compliance started slipping. Some states require specific supervisor-to-guard ratios, mandatory continuing training hours, and documentation trails proving guards are licensed and current. When you're managing 5 contracts, staying on top of that is manageable. When you're managing 15 added fast, without new systems or new managers, compliance gaps start opening up, the exact kind of gaps that turn a minor incident into a negligent supervision lawsuit. The very liability bomb from the last section, now with a much bigger fuse lit. By month 10 of his growth spurt, this owner wasn't running a bigger, more profitable company. He was running a bigger, more exposed one, burning cash on overtime, risking compliance violations, and one bad incident away from the kind of lawsuit that erases years of work in a single judgment. He survived, but barely, and only by hitting pause on new contracts to fix his foundation before growing further. Which raises the real question this entire video has been building toward. If commodity contracts are thin, niche contracts are risky, and scaling fast is dangerous, what do the owners who actually win in this industry do differently? What the winners actually do differently, if you strip away the mistakes we've walked through, the razor-thin commodity margins, the underinsured liability exposure, the reckless scaling, what's left is a surprisingly clear blueprint. The owners who actually build wealth in this industry aren't doing something exotic. They're just disciplined about the exact things everyone else treats as an afterthought. Start with technology. The operators who scale successfully invest early in scheduling and workforce management software. Systems that track licensing expiration dates, flag overtime before it happens, and make sure every post is covered without relying on a group chat and good luck. It's not glamorous, but it's the difference between the owner who caught his compliance gaps at 15 contracts and the one who didn't. Next, specialization, but done deliberately, not accidentally. The highest margin operators don't just stumble into executive protection or high-risk cash contracts. They build genuine expertise there, invest in real training beyond state minimums, and use that expertise to justify premium rates instead of just chasing them. That specialization is also what lets them walk away from the commodity bidding wars entirely, where competitors are still fighting over $26 an hour contracts. Then there's contract diversification. Smart owners don't let any single client represent more than a modest slice of revenue, because a security company that depends on one retail chain or one event company is one lost contract away from collapse. Spread across multiple industries and multiple contract types, a bad month for one client barely registers. And finally, the one every one of our cautionary stories was missing: proper insurance structuring. That means carrying liability limits that actually match real-world settlement numbers, not just state minimums, and working with brokers who understand security-specific risk instead of generic small business policies. It costs more upfront. It's also the single line item that determines whether a bad incident is a bad month or a bankruptcy filing. None of this is complicated. It's not a secret system or an insider trick. It's simply running the business like the numbers actually matter. Because in this industry, they're the only thing standing between a company that compounds wealth for a decade and one that becomes a cautionary story after 18 months. Which brings us back to those two guys we started with. Because by now, you already know exactly which path each of them was on. The verdict: is this a business, an investment, or a trap? So let's go back to where we started. Two guys, same starting capital, same industry, same year. The first owner chased the number that felt real, that 1400 an hour illusion, and kept it alive by underbidding competitors down to $26 an hour just to win contracts. He never modeled workers' comp properly, carried the state minimum liability policy because it was cheaper, and when he tripled his contracts in a single year, he did it with a spreadsheet and a group text instead of real systems. He didn't lose everything because he was lazy or careless in any obvious way. He lost everything because he never ran the second ledger, the one built from insurance turnover and compliance, until reality ran it for him. The second owner ran that ledger on day one. He knew his real margin on standard contracts was closer to $3 or $4 an hour, so he deliberately moved toward specialization, executive protection, and high-risk contracts, where barriers to entry protected his pricing. He carried liability coverage size to actual settlement risk, not state minimums. And when growth opportunities came, he scaled his systems before he scaled his contracts, not after. Here's the framework to take with you. A private security company is a legitimately good business or a genuinely smart investment at the exact point where three things are true. Your margins are specialized enough to survive commodity price pressure. Your liability coverage is sized to real-world judgments instead of theoretical ones, and your growth is paced to your systems instead of your ambition. Miss any one of those three, and you're not running a business. You're running a liability with a payroll attached, waiting for one bad month to reveal it. So if you're ever looking at a security contract, whether you're the one signing it, buying into the company, or investing in one, don't start with the revenue. Everyone starts with the revenue, and revenue is exactly what lied to our first owner from the very beginning. Start with the liability math. Because in this industry, that's not the boring part of the spreadsheet. It's the entire business.